This is Net News Network headline news for Friday, May 13th, 2022. Well, we're learning more about this baby formula shortage. Apparently, it doesn't really have much to do with supply chain issues. 98% of American baby formula is produced or was produced right here in the good old United States. But one of the main producers that makes the baby formula was sued because 2 babies died from defective or contaminated formula. And that's terrible. But should the entire country suffer because of 2 deaths? Maybe federal regulators should have done more to make sure they were following protocols to have safe formula rather than getting this plant shut down, and now the entire country is facing a shortage, and you've got mothers who can't get formula for their kids that may not have other options. During a White House press conference yesterday, Jen Psaki, this Friday the 13th is her last day, thankfully, stated that another problem contributing to the shortage is hoarding, that people are hoarding baby formula. Whenever she's questioned about food shortages or any types of shortages like this, it always gets put back on the American people. We're hoarding, we're buying too much stuff. Never has anything to do with our lovely government or their inability to function. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Lawyers and insurance companies have ruined this country. All their little frivolous lawsuits, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily frivolous because it is terrible that 2 babies died, but you've got to look at the big picture here. Our wonderful government is looking at options to bring baby formula in from other countries, but then we're going to run into supply chain issues and getting it here, I'm sure. In the meantime, if you can't find formula, you should find natural alternatives to feed your baby. Amid rising inflation, supply chain shortages, all these things going on that are bearing down on Americans, the government is also trying to implement all these Green New Deal type of changes, getting rid of oil and all these other things that are going to make your life much more difficult. Climate change activists have been beating the same drum since at least 1978, the New York Post reports, in the comic cries of climate apocalypse, 50 years of spurious scaremongering. Political leaders, including U.S. climate envoy John Kerry, respected organizations such as the United Nations, and esteemed scientists have been warning us for years now that the world is about to end. Most recently, at the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, Scotland, speakers said the world has reached its last chance to save humanity from the impending doom of climate catastrophe barreling down the highway of life. At that meeting, John Kerry proclaimed that we only have 9 years left to curtail the worst of global warming. Sound familiar? In 2009, former Vice President Al Gore said the North Pole will be ice-free in the summer by 2013 because of man-made global warming. That's from the Poynter Institute, a nonpartisan educational institute for journalists. In 2019, Britain's Prince Charles weighed in, announcing that we had only 18 months to put an end to climate change. The fear-mongering goes back to 1972, 50 years ago, at the very first UN Environment Summit in Stockholm, Sweden. At that time, the world was going to end in 1982. The Limits to Growth report issued from that summit said that the natural resources would run out in a few decades and that humanity would be overwhelmed by pollution. These predictions have been failing for decades, the New York Post says. In 1989, the head of the UN's Environment Program declared we had just 3 years to win or lose the climate struggle. In 1982, the UN was predicting planetary devastation as complete, as irreversible as any nuclear holocaust by the year 2000. The New York Post goes on to stress that just as mankind devised a way to fight fires, mankind will continue to find ways to lessen pollution's harm to the environment. After all, pollution has been decreasing in developed nations in the past few decades, the article notes. Yes, all true. And while it may be comical to look at this stuff, the fact is our lunatic government either believes this or more than likely is just using this to tax you to death and completely upend your way of life, to put all kinds of restrictions and surveillance on you and find ways to control every aspect of your life. When is enough of this? And here's a horror story for you on this Friday the 13th. A San Jose police officer, California, was charged with masturbating in the home of a family where he and other officers were dispatched for a disturbance. Officer Matthew Dominguez, 32, was arrested and will be arraigned on a misdemeanor indecent exposure charge on June 22nd. If convicted, he could face a year in jail and be placed on sexual offender list for 10 years. Dominguez is currently on administrative leave from the police department. The charged behavior is beyond disturbing. District Attorney Jeff Rosen said law enforcement officers respond to our homes to help crime victims, not terrorize, traumatize, and create new victims. On April 21st, Dominguez, who had been on the force for 4 years, responded with 2 other officers to a home on a call that a mentally ill family member was being violent. Evidence shows that after initiating the investigation, Dominguez sent the other officers away to locate the subject. Shortly thereafter, Dominguez touched himself in front of 2 female family members. Subsequent to this, Dominguez exposed himself to the mother. I mean, how, this isn't the first time this guy did something like this if he's been there for 4 years. This is a cop in uniform on a call. Unbelievable. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi gave a speech yesterday where she was talking about abortion, and in it she said, yesterday Senate Republicans lined up in lockstep behind Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump to vote to rip away the constitutional right to health freedom from every American woman across the country. Every day Republicans show their intention to punish and control women. Donald Trump. Last time I checked, he's not in any kind of political office. Nobody's lining up behind him. And once again, nobody's saying abortion will be illegal. It will only lie with the states to decide if that state wants to make it legal or not. I think it's interesting how these Democrats always have to fall back on Donald Trump because they can't talk about any of the things they've done that is good, because there's nothing. All they can do is stir up their base by mentioning Donald Trump. Biden did it just the other day in a re-election campaign speech. He kept referring to the Maga crowd, the Maga people, Donald Trump. What happened to those reunification speeches you gave before you became president, dude? This has been Net News Network Headline News. For more, visit netnewsnetwork.net. Thanks for listening.